As I think that we have a quorum for today, I'm going to kick things off. Hi, I'm Taya Lampkin, and I work on the open source community here at Google and work a lot with the OpenXLA ecosystem in case you haven't met me before. And we're just going to kick off our monthly meeting. We're not able to have a meeting last month. Many people were on vacation, as I'm sure many of you all were also on vacation, hopefully. But we have plenty to talk about this month. And usually what we start off with is kind of restating a couple of our project goals and sharing resources for folks who have not been in this meeting before or had a chance to get up to speed on the project and what it's all about and how we collaborate. So what is OpenXLA? We're building an open state-of-the-art machine learning compiler ecosystem collaboratively with hardware and software partners, as well as the wider compiler ecosystem. And generally, we like to start meetings to invite people to introduce themselves who haven't been here before. If you'd like to do so, please pipe up now. If you don't want to do that live, feel free to introduce yourself over chat. We have a lot of folks who are part of the community. Would love to hear if we have anyone new today. Anyone like to introduce themselves?
Hi, this is Arvind Balaji. I'm an infrastructure architect from KLA.
Hi,
Awesome.
folks. This is Todd White. Let me do a brief self-introduction. I work for ARM and has been working on total stuff, mostly in TensorFlow, MLIR. Yeah, I'm happy to join the meeting. Thank you.
Awesome, welcome.
Hi, I'm Jim Bodwin. I'm a former Google employee. I know some of the Google people on this meeting. And I'm currently at a startup. We're looking at doing hardware and software for generative AI, like everybody else.
Awesome, welcome. Anyone else? All right, again, feel free to introduce yourself in chat if that is more comfortable for you. I also am pasting a link to our OpenXLA community meeting notes, our public notes for this meeting, in case anyone would like to contribute or follow along. That also has a bunch of information about our monthly meetings as well. So highly recommend that you bookmark that resource. Okay, so I will move forward. Some details around our project collaboration, channels for conversation, and how these meetings are run. We meet every third Tuesday at 8 a.m. We try as best as possible to propose agendas ahead of time in OpenXLA Discuss and the meeting notes that I linked to. And we always publish the meeting recording slides and notes the day after these meetings in case you want to share with members of your community or company, or just follow up on items that you didn't get the details of. And generally these meetings include updates from all the components in OpenXLA, as well as broader community topics and requests for comment or RFCs. If you would like to follow more closely the technical conversations happening in the community, highly recommend subscribing to OpenXLA Discuss, which is the mailing list where we announce and follow up on a lot of the conversations we have in this meeting. Again, here are meeting notes. Everyone is welcome to propose talks, and please do so in the meeting notes, or you can also email me, Taya Lampkin at google.com. In case you feel more comfortable coordinating a presentation, not in the meeting notes doc. But any presentations are super welcome, as well as any volunteer hosts from the community to host this meeting going forward. It's a lot of work, and it would be awesome to have some extra collaboration from the community to make sure that these meetings are as valuable as possible. Here are our main collaboration channels. These will be available via the slides that I'll share after the meeting and link to from that same meeting notes doc in case you want to dive in and explore those asynchronously. All right, so this section is our community updates, what is going on both technically and as far as community outreach in the OpenXLA community. Right now, we have a bunch of active RFCs. I believe all of these are potentially, with the exception of sparsity, very related to our StableHLO component. And we've plopped in some updates on each of these RFCs. I believe a few of them have been open for a while. So we just wanted to give the community some update on the progress as we go. As we have a lot of stuff to talk about today, I'm just gonna move through the RFCs and count on you to read them if they're of interest to you. We also have a couple of RFCs for the XLA GPU compiler, multi-streaming and CUDA graphs, and another one on ERE VMs and how in XLA GPU. And some of these are in active implementation or ideation modes. So please follow up here if you're interested. Again, all of our RFCs are open for comment. So all of the links in the left-hand column are links to documents or PRs where community comment, feedback, and questions are very, very welcome. So we would love to get more engagement and feedback on those as we go. Also, RFCs are welcome from any members of the community, even if you don't happen to be a maintainer component. If you have a concrete idea, design idea, or proposal to share, that is something that we also are very excited about, all of the OpenXLA maintainers. So you can either start a thread on OpenXLA Discuss to start sharing your idea in advance of publishing an official RFC, or reach out to any of the maintainers to help sponsor and get that design ready and provide feedback on a document before you share it publicly. All right, so the main OpenXLA community news is that we have an RFC out right now that we hope to merge very soon this week, that establishes our OpenXLA core maintainers. This RFC essentially proposes dissolving the OpenXLA steering committee, which we created earlier this year. That was made up of Googlers who are primarily looking to bootstrap our OpenXLA governance model that we ratified again earlier this year, and establishes the first set of core maintainers with the scope and responsibilities that were outlined in the OpenXLA governance model. We also propose an initial set of maintainers, including one of our first maintainers outside of Google, which we hope to further expand on and make sure that this group of people is increasingly diverse as we go forward with the project. Please take a look at the RFC link. Again, it's based on our ratified governance model that is also linked to from here. The main feedback on the RFC so far has been that module maintainers need better access to GitHub admin privileges in order to productively take care of the repos under their responsibility. We don't actually have module maintainer governance in place yet, but this is something that we see as a requirement for getting that up and running. We're actively working on unblocking, giving this privilege access to module maintainers and working out kind of policy details for how we administer GitHub organizations at Google, but this is definitely something that seems 99% is going to happen. Just need to work through a couple of more details and also make sure that we're doing an open source security audit on the entire organization as part of expanding and provisioning more access to folks outside of Google. And also feedback is in general, more transparency is needed and appreciated around some of the open source design decisions that land upstream. We agree, and we are working to make sure that any any large features, API changes, new repositories all go through the OpenXLA request for comment or RFC process. And one of the first things that the OpenXLA core maintainers are going to do, including rolling out module governance very shortly, is introducing a formal RFC process and basic guidelines for when we should be sharing proposals, as well as a code of conduct. One of the things that we expect to have as part of module governance is basic expectations around how frequently those modules and the projects within identified modules should be sharing roadmap updates with the rest of the community. And so hopefully that's another way that we can be more transparent in the project and have a kind of baseline level of transparency we expect all modules to snap to. Any questions on the proposal, the RFC? And again, I'm going to keep this open one more day so that the community can also have a chance to comment asynchronously. I believe this has been open for 2 weeks already, which is our standard window for RFCs, but we'll make sure that we have final comments leave it open for final comments until we consider it accepted and make sure that everyone who's left feedback feels relatively okay with the response and the incorporation of that feedback that we've made into the RFC. Okay, if there are no more comments, I'll move forward to the next piece of community news. We are planning on having a fall summit for OpenXLA. We had a project summit, a smaller one earlier this spring, and we found that there was a lot of demand for people to attend. We weren't able to accommodate everyone, and we wanted to kind of expand the number of attendees and the time that we had to dive into OpenXLA ecosystem presentations, roadmap conversations, design discussions, and also just general information sharing. So this fall, we're planning to have a summit October 18th and 19th, the week after, I believe, the MLIR or LLVM developer meetup, for those of you who will already be in town. We're planning on doing this again in the South Bay area in California, and likely at Google offices, just because it's a lot logistically simpler and cheaper to organize that with the resources that we have. We are actively looking for any community members who would like to contribute to the event, volunteer, or anything like that. And we'll share more details soon via the OpenXLA Discuss mailing list, where we'll also publish a call for proposals and talks this week. So mark that on your calendar, and please feel free to follow up again by email if you have any advanced questions before the CFP goes live. Okay, and now we're moving on to the part of the community meeting where we get technical updates. We have a couple of roadmap updates to share for the OpenXLA compiler, as well as a couple of the other components in the project. So at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Jacques, who will be presenting.
Hi, thanks there. Sorry, 1 second. Let me just get the presentation going. Oops, actually, there, while you present, will you just scroll for me? Thanks. Okay. Hi, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jacques. Good to see all the familiar faces again. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to be presenting a couple of the OpenXLA project updates. On the next slide, we'll show sort of, all the different topics that we'll be discussing today. So as a bit of an overview, we're talking about, StableHLO, XLA CPU and GPU plans, the PGRT plugin and runtime, as well as the open source developer experience, which I think is something that's quite important. And to just plus one some of the things Taya said with respect to the community, please feel free already to think about some of the things you want to present, and how we can improve this experience for you. Next slide, please. So let me just start with sort of a revised OpenXLA GPU plan. So Google has revised its strategy and priority for the OpenXLA GPU compilers. So as beginning, XLA GPU remains the production GPU compiler for internal and external users for TensorFlow JAX and for PyTorch performance via PyTorch XLA. So this is a change where previously we had this, if you look at the roadmaps and the April presentations, the plan was to produce a new compiler for the OpenXLA GPU compiler, a new using components from the different components. And instead, we plan to use XLA GPU as a base and modernize and extend it. So within OpenXLA compiler, we will deliver wins in performance and usability by improving and modernizing XLA GPU. We will do so by taking advantage of all our technology assets. You may have seen incorporation of a lot of MLIR into XLA GPU. We're talking about like the Triton code generation. We'll talk about the Erie runtime next. So creating components from MLIR as well as Erie to modernize XLA GPU and provide best performance. We'll also look at some of the issues that folks community have been looking up and that sort of instigated some of our previous work here. Improving, the code quality and tech that was identified as an issue. So in order to enable high velocity, more research contributions and better collaboration, XLA will prioritize refactoring and improvement to the overall code quality to make it easier for folks to be able to collaborate and get the best performance for all the frameworks and all our users. Next slide, please. So if we look at like OpenXLA Future, GPU Future, and so this is one where some of the folks from our previous one may remember a different variant of this slide. So this is sort of like the revised plans. XLA GPU is the current and future production compiler. Google continues to invest in and leverage XLA for over 90% of GPU, CPU, and TPU workloads across Alphabet, which is something where Google is very invested in. TensorFlow JAX and PyTorch XLA will leverage XLA as its backend. We will leverage components from Erie and MLIR, taking the best, migrating Curate into one production compiler. The aim is to consistently improve key benchmarks. So have it very much driven by the utility, treat a lot of the components that we're working with in the open and we have folks collaborating with and contributing to and curating them if and when they make sense. And importantly, we also want to have OpenXLA GPU in the future be an extensible platform, one with flexibility for developers to inject functionality and plugin point for vendor-specific customizations and compilation flow. So make it easier to target your specific hardware. Next slide, please. So to in a way summarize the I'm gonna say philosophy, the GPU compiler approach we'll be following. We will be incrementally evolving the compiler to be more modular, more maintainable, and more applicable to a broader set of accelerators. I think there are more GPU variants and combinations that have arisen, and we want to make sure that we can serve many of those. XLA GPU will encourage small experiments with clear performance boosting hypotheses. So it's a case of being able to prototype, measure, and commit, making sure that there is value when we commit. It will be built on the existing OpenXLA architecture, but it won't be constrained by it. So this is a case where, even though this is where we start and we want to gradually evolve and modularize, we want to have performance-driven change can and should evolve the architecture, right? So this is a case where we don't want it to be, we want to look at the existing structure and think this is a given, but instead, if there are big changes that make sense, it will definitely be considered within, the performance, based on metrics. So we'll design large changes in the open, in OpenXLA. I think this is sort of like one of the things that we've established, but want to emphasize this. This will include via RFCs and public meetings. So we have not yet had open design meeting for OpenXLA, but it's actually definitely something we want to do in the future to be able to get feedback from the community on larger design features. Next slide, please. So among all of this, we've also seen some really great improvements within XLA GPU, even like this year. So on the y-axis, you have the performance normalized, and on the horizontal axis, months. And so you can see here, from roughly the start of this year to today, there's been roughly a 6x increase in performance on the XLA GPU for a reference LLM benchmark with 400 billion parameters. So this is one of the models we've been looking at in quite detail. It's been one of the ones that we've been focusing on a lot. One I think also of interest to many folks in the community. And you can sort of see like a steady increase in performance throughout the year, giving I think a quite large bump in performance in a relatively short amount of time. So I think this is quite exciting, being able to incorporate like the different techniques. And I think on the next slide we'll discuss some of these. Next slide, Thea. So one of the performance, okay, actually, starting back up again, right? Again, like the priorities here is, we have some new priorities given the investment Google is making here. So Google is making a huge investment in GPU acceleration. This is something we've heard from the community that, and we've seen like adoption-wise is quite important. We want to make it so that OpenXLA has the highest performance GPU compiler for everyone. Part of this, and some of this already shown in the previous slide, and some of it will be shown in the future. This will consist of a new global cost model that aims to make optimal code generation, scheduling, and fusion decisions. It will also be helpful in utilizing different libraries and deciding when to offload and when to cogen. There has been a huge push on the Triton cogen to the limit with increasingly inclusive fusions. So you would have seen a lot of work on utilizing Triton and its new MLIR backend to be able to generate great performance. And a lot of this was actually representative in the performance slide on the previous any performance numbers on the previous slide. One of the RFCs that Thea mentioned and that folks may have seen some initial work on is we have a prototype on replacing the JIT RT with the ERI runtime. So this is for future performance as well as modularity that we want to improve there. Some upcoming work that you'll see soon, more efficient auto tuning, caching, and AOT compilation for GPU. And we'll actually have an upcoming RFC and open design meeting for pattern matching. So for this new form of pattern matching, the goal is to have something that is easier to tune and debug inside of XLA GPU. And that RFC will be coming out soon. Next slide. Okay, so I sort of mentioned this in terms of like the future state for OpenXLA GPU. We talked about having new extensibility points, making it easier for different users to be able to incorporate their hardware and evaluate. And so to mention perhaps a little bit about the extensibility points plan, we mentioned XLA GPU will be the curated production solution. It will be the focal point for collaboration while offering specialization and local workarounds. So this is something that we are not there yet, but it's what XLA GPU team is very interested in providing. So in particular, this includes a couple of different elements amongst others. One of which is out-of-tree builds, which can seamlessly integrate into ML framework execution. So this is the ability to be able to host your own compiler and runtime, be able to vet it across like the JAX, TensorFlow, and PyTorch XLA. So this is something where under the OpenXLA APIs of PGRT and StableHLO, users can start providing a full solution for their backend and being able to participate in the OpenXLA ecosystem. Currently, you probably would have noticed like our CI and performance testing. There's more work that's needed to be able to externalize that, be able to enable collaboration from different folks in the community. One of the interesting ones there is the bring your own runner approach. So this is something where folks, can actually add their own runner to the testing of OpenXLA to enable for testing both correctness and performance, as well as tracking performance. Folks may recall the previous RFC on benchmarking. And this includes testing even on some yet to be released hardware. Now, this is something where I think more details are still TBD. There is a lot of details on being able to enable this, exactly what this means and how this fits in with like the different systems, what's the requirements, etc. But it's something we want to enable. Then we talk about like the global cost model and the like, but a lot of these are very specialized to the hardware we've been looking at. So if you look at the compilation flow, some of the heuristics, some of the optimizations, they have been tailored to lesser or greater extent based on the hardware we've been looking at, and folks in the community, have been making contributions to. We want to make it easier for the specialization of some of these passes and analysis. So, for example, in the global cost model, being able to provide new, target information and being able to utilize that within the model to make decisions rather than having it too many parts hard-coded. And so, I mean, the goal of these is to be able to optimally target some specialized hardware. So, I think this is, there's a lot more work to be done here. This is definitely aspirational, and it's something where we'd like feedback. What things are of interest? Which things can you utilize earlier rather than later? And so, for example, I mean, like the R3 builds, we've had some good feedback with respect to uses of that. But I think we'd love to hear more from folks' actual use cases. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've mostly been talking about the GPU compiler and the strategy there, where where we're starting from, revised from creating a new one to incorporating, modernizing. Similarly, on the CPU compiler strategy, there's been a lot of discussion. So we want to build an OpenXLA compiler, leveraging the best of Erie CPU and XLA CPU. And I think folks may have even noticed like CPU next. So there's a couple of different components there where we want to integrate into one system. So we want this new OpenXLA CPU compiler to focus on capabilities, robustness, and performance. So it's a case where we want to make sure that it serves many production needs and is able to handle many different varieties and cases, using the base components. And I think there's been a lot of active work in different companies and different libraries that we haven't yet looked at, and I think that can provide great benefit here. Now, this is something I mentioned that is still very much under active discussion. There's a roadmap coming at the end of Q3, and this is definitely something where we would like feedback. This is one where like please reach out to we have, if the post in OpenXLA discussed, as Taya mentioned it, it's an easy one to get some feedback and collaboration discussion going in open. We also have Diego looking at bringing some of these things together and collecting all the feedback. So please reach out to him. I think quite a few folks in the CPU community already know him. And so he's a good person to reach out to here and discuss, like any requirements or needs or preferences with respect to the strategy. Next slide, please. Okay, well, and with that, unfortunately, rather quick, I go rather quick run through. We actually are into the next phase in like StableHLO. I don't know, do we leave time here for questions, or do we have other questions at the end?
I feel like now would be a good time to pause for questions, and I'll time keep to make sure we have enough time for the rest of the presentation. But just to set expectations, we are covering if the impact where there is any impact to StableHLO, PGRT, and also our general open source developer experience later. So if you have any questions specific to those, please hold on to those until we presented those slides. And also feel free to pop your questions into meeting chat if you feel more comfortable with that. All right, I think that we'll definitely have extra time at the end in case anyone has questions after digesting further. But for now, let's move on. Eugene, are you able to present the slide?
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you, Thea. Thank you, Jacques, for the presentation. So as Jacques mentioned, there has been some strategy change on the compiler side. And I'm here to talk about StableHLO and what specifically changed there and what are our plans moving forward. So first of all, from the StableHLO perspective, really nothing changes, nothing at all. Earlier this year at the OpenXLA Summit, and previously last year when the project was launched, we talked about the mission of StableHLO as the lingua franca between ML frameworks and ML compilers. It grew to be the compiler interface of the OpenXLA project. That remains the same. Also earlier this year, we talked about the roadmap. Here it is linked on the slide. And more specifically about the plans to release StableHLO 1.0 by the end of the year. This plan is on track. The scope, what exactly goes into there, you can take a look at the link. Today we don't have time to go into this much detail, but please take a look and provide feedback if you'd like to share something. And in addition to this, maybe some of you saw on the OpenXLA Discuss mailing list a pretty cool announcement that the TF-Lite converter will actually support StableHLO as an input format. So this further strengthens the mission of StableHLO as the compiler interface. It has a spec, it has compatibility guarantees, all those interesting features, connections to major frameworks. And so those strengths convinced the TF-Lite team to also adopt it. So this is great news for StableHLO and can talk to the strengths of the project. One thing that we're still evaluating roadmap-wise and design-wise is interoperability between StableHLO and HLO. So a quick refresher, StableHLO is the compiler interface that we just talked about, and HLO is the compiler AR of the XLA compiler. So the two are built using different technologies, and given the increased role of HLO-based passes, HLO-based stack in XLA GPU, now there's more importance put on the interoperability between those technologies. Overall, I think we're in a good spot. So they're like 80–90% the same already. And the remaining 10%, we're planning to talk more about this later. Please expect an RFC on OpenXLA Discuss. Okay, that's it as far as StableHLO updates go. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Eugene. Is there any, or sorry, oh, I'm getting some feedback. Are there any questions? All right, I will move forward then. We have a brief update on PGRT. Aman, I believe you're on the call if you'd like to present. Otherwise, I'm happy to talk over this slide. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead then. So the PGRT API roadmap is not impacted, and the C API does not change and is actually stabilizing. The one potential area of impact is that the reference plugin implementation for PGRT is currently Erie based, and we'll be creating a successor plugin for PGRT based on XLA and XLA GPU. This should not exist or impact any existing PGRT plugins that were already created with the existing reference implementation. And we will share a timeline for the successor reference plugin shortly. This is still something that the team is working on. Any questions? Okay. Let's see. Okay, so one of the big things that we expected feedback around is the open source developer experience. Mainly because the current experience for open source developers, especially in XLA, is definitely not ideal. And we do see PR turnaround time being too long, although it has improved quite a bit since XLA was moved out of the TensorFlow repository. But we still know that it is not, those PR turnaround times are not fast enough. And we'd also like to open up PR reviews to non-Googlers, as well as just improving the test parity for open source developers of XLA. We have some plans in the short term to improve things. That being said, we also have long-term plans that we'll share more of in the coming couple of months. And in general, the philosophy and the intent is to move to as close to an open source, if not fully open source first development model for XLA. There's just a lot of infrastructure work that will come with that. And that's an area that we're going to be investing in the medium term. We also, again, just before I talk through the actual granular points on the slide, really want the community and the open source developers who work on XLA to give heavy input into what this will all look like and what the requirements are of open source developers to really be productive in that code base. So again, the short-term improvements that we're going to be making as quickly as possible is that we're actively monitoring and tracking our target PR review and merge times. So we're setting basically SLOs for XLA maintainers to review and merge candidate PRs much more quickly than right now. And we do plan on sharing those SLOs and how we're tracking against them publicly, probably via an interface like BigQuery or Looker. And then on top of that, we're looking at creating a public meeting, either a biweekly or monthly cadence, specifically dedicated to the open source developer experience, particularly in XLA. So there's a consistent channel both for providing updates on these PR metrics and any planned changes to the CI to improve developer productivity, and also to gather community feedback and requirements on how we can better support the open source developer experience. Some planned developer infrastructure work is improvements in the PR experience with respect to unified builds, warnings, errors, and linting for those PRs. As well as, and I mentioned this before, increased and expanded GitHub access for non-Google maintainers in particular repositories in the OpenXLA project, where we have non-Google maintainers who really need to have all the tools at their disposal to properly maintain the repositories that they're supporting and working on. And as I mentioned, in the long term, we're committed to parity contributor experience for open source development. And when I mean parity, that means that there's as much test transparency as possible for open source developers as there is for Google developers. And there should be little to no difference in developer experience, regardless of what organization you're coming from as a contributor. Basically, we just want everyone to have a similar experience and have all the tools they need to be productive. And this will be really critical to fulfill our goal of having, not having Google be the only maintainers for basically all of the repositories in the OpenXLA project, and to move towards, a diverse shared governance model, which I talked about before. Is there any questions on this slide? Okay, great. And again, we'll share more updates on standing up that public meeting I mentioned for developer experience on the OpenXLA Discuss mailing list. People have already been providing really great feedback via that mailing list, and Stella in particular, thank you. I don't think she's on the call, but she's been a great advocate for the changes that need to be made to make non-Google maintainers and contributors more productive in the project, which is our goal. So any feedback along those lines, concrete things that are blocking you or slowing you down, or are creating barriers to contribution, we would like to hear about those in the public mailing list. That way we can make sure that we're designing for the needs of the community, and also getting feedback from others who might be having similar problems to the ones you're experiencing. So thank you in advance for sharing your feedback, if not in this meeting. Okay. That's the end of our planned content for today. And if anyone has any items that they'd like to bring up to discuss, or if you have any additional comments or questions based on the presentations that we shared, this is the time to do it. Otherwise, sometimes we break early if there isn't enough to discuss, and we can give people's time back. But I definitely would love to hear questions from the community if anyone has something on their mind. Okay. Thank you for everyone for joining. I think one of the things that we really are hoping to get is more presentations in these meetings, just to have, these meetings also provide signal from developments happening in the OpenXLA project, even if they're very early or experimental, as well as the larger OpenXLA project ecosystem. So if you're thinking, oh, maybe what I want to talk about is like not quite baked enough, or maybe somewhat, OpenXLA aligned, but not necessarily being actively worked on in the project, we still would love to hear from you and have those presentations. This isn't supposed to be, a meeting where everything is super formal and pre-baked. So please volunteer to present. And even if you just want to bring up a topic for general conversation, that's something that has been really valuable in past meetings. And so, but again, thanks everyone for joining the meeting. We'll be sharing the slides, notes, and meeting recording. If not today, then tomorrow. And we look forward to hearing your asynchronous feedback and conversation on the OpenXLA Discuss mailing list. And do watch out for the OpenXLA Summit announcement and CFP there.